I'm certainly no expert at fabric work, aircraft fabric work. Well, any kind of fabric work when it comes to that, whether it's making a shirt or doing fabric work on an airplane. When I first started doing this job, I was leasing an airplane from a fella, and one spring I went down to check the airplane out before the season started. I went over the airplane and one of the flaps fell off in my hand. It'd gotten corrosion in there on one of the hinges or both of the hinges. Anyway, the thing just fell apart in my hand. So I called up Anchorage to Stoddard's and ordered a new flap, and because I didn't know anything about fabric covering, I had them find somebody up there to do the cover for me. Gal up there did a pretty good job at it and did everything to finish the airplane all up, or the flap all up and everything, and shipped it down to me, and I put it on and went on my merry way. Well, about 5 years or so after I bought my airplane, we had it in doing an annual on it. Found that the tail feathers were rusty, and we brought the horizontal stabilizers and the elevators here to the house, took them apart, cleaned them up, and recovered those. While my mechanics were here doing the work, doing the annual on the airplane and helping with the work on it and stuff, and they showed me how to do the cover work on the tail feathers on the airplane, and we got that done. And then since then I had to do some repairs on the door of the airplane, so I had to strip the cover off of it and recover it. And then about 6 years ago or so I replaced the fuselage on the airplane, and I recovered it and new tail feathers and stuff on it and recovered those. And then I had to do some repairs on one aileron and one flap, and so I got a little bit of work working with fabric on that and covering that. But this will be the first time I've done a wing. And a wing is probably not as complex as a fuselage, more complex than the horizontal stabilizers and rudder and elevator. But anyway, it's been a while since I've done it. What the book says to do on the wing to cover it is to start on the bottom, measure out the fabric and run it out past both ends, the inboard end and the wingtip end, cut it off, glue on the leading edge and then the trailing edge. Most of the stuff they tell you in the book will work just fine on it, but we can do a little bit of adaptation to it. So here's what I've got left from doing the fuselage. Is I've got a box of odds and ends that I've saved out. Most people probably would have thrown away, but I've got a bunch of stuff here I've saved out, cut-offs and stuff like that. Some pretty good sized pieces, but anyway, there's a lot of fabric in here that is too good to throw away, that can be used for patching and stuff like that. So that's my box of fabric. Well, I've got this piece here, and I'm going to cut it out and make a piece to fit in to where this aileron ends, the outboard end of the aileron, where it goes out to the outboard rib of the aileron. I'm going to go ahead and put a small piece in there and cover that first, because the way it works is if you put the fabric on there, then you've got to cut out around that and try to fit that in there and stuff, and it's a bunch of darts and odd shapes and things like that that fits kind of rough. So anyway, I'm going to put this in there first, and then I'm going to cover the wing root next, the inboard rib, instead of just pulling the fabric over there and covering it with that. So anyway, I've got some Polytack out, and this is some old Polytack that I've had for a while, this container, and it's actually still pretty good. So I put a little bit. I found that these little juice containers are just perfect for putting Polytack in and carrying around and doing work with and stuff like that. They're just right for putting a little bit at a time in there. I mix a little bit of MEK in it to make it go farther. And then I just went down to the store and bought a pure bristle brush made in Indonesia, the cheapest one I could find. Actually, I bought some 1-inch ones, the expensive ones. I had a lot of paint brushes in the store, but most of them were plastic bristles. Even the high-priced ones had plastic bristles. So these are the only ones I could find, and these cheap ones here that had natural bristles in them. Well, anyway, I bought some good ones to use when I start getting into finishing, but I bought these cheap ones to try them out. And one of the things that happens with these brushes when you're using them is these bristles come out. They'll lay in the work and make a mess, and you've got to try to get them out, because if you leave them there and then cover over them, they show through the taping and the other fabric and stuff like that. It looks like hell. They're hard to get out once the fabric, or once the glue dries and stuff. But so I did something on this one. I usually take a pair of pliers and pinch this down right here, this ferrule around here that holds the bristles in. I usually pinch that down tight so that it's a little tighter than usual and helps pinch them in there better. But this time what I did was I took some crazy glue, some super glue, and put down in there in the ferrule and in the brushes, and hopefully that'll keep the bristles in there. Go try it and see what happens on that. This is the first time I've tried that, but we'll try it and see what happens. So this is a 1/2 inch brush. I'm just going to use it for this, starting on this fine lines here. When I get to putting the Polytack on the fabric, I'm going to use a 1 inch brush for that, but this just goes on pretty thin here. So okay, I've got this leftover piece of fabric that's roughly a triangular shape, and I've got to try to fit it in here into this rib, the inboard side of this rib where it meets up with the aileron here. And it got a kind of a concave surface here that we got to meet up to, as well as the rib itself. So I'm going to try to fit this in here. And I've got some little clamps. These things work pretty good. I had clothespins and they work okay, but these little clamps here work really good for this fabric work, and they're just cheap plastic clamps from Harbor Freight. All right, now I've got that set in there the way I want it. I'm just going to take a pencil and mark this fabric here, the edge of this rib, the cap strip on this rib. That tucks in like that. Now you can see how frayed these edges are where it gets cut here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to put a little bit of Polytack right along where this pencil line is, and that'll keep it from fraying when I cut it with the scissors. I've coated that line where my cuts are going to be made with the Polytack. I'll let it set for just a few minutes here, a little bit for that Polytack to set up. It doesn't take very long for the solvents to evaporate out of it and set up, and then when we make the cut, we'll make a nice clean cut there. If I don't wait for that stuff to dry out, then the Polytack's going to stick onto the scissors and make them hard to use. So I've got my hands covered with some liquid gloves, invisible gloves, to protect them from the solvents and stuff. I've tried using nitrile gloves. That's just a disaster. Those nitrile gloves, solvents that's in the poly stuff just attacks the nitrile gloves and dissolves it, and it winds up tearing and getting stuck in the fabric and just making a mess. The book says to try vinyl gloves. I haven't tried vinyl gloves yet. There is a difference between the vinyl and the nitrile gloves on how well they work on different things sometimes. Maybe I'll go try the vinyl gloves. All right, that's pretty well dried out. You can see how nice that cuts. Okay, that piece is cut out. All right, now what I'll do is I should have left this thing in some solvent or something instead of letting it sit out on the bench. Now it's probably stiff. That's all right. Put some Polytack on here. Now I want to take the fabric and just rub it right into that Polytack so that Polytack comes right through the fabric, right through the weave of the fabric. So what this does is give me a chance to practice this stuff on something that's not necessarily critical, a small piece here like this, before I start working on the big stuff. Alright, I screwed up there. I screwed up. Let's see what happens here. Alright, I screwed that up. So we'll try it again. I got my piece of fabric out too far. I didn't get it up there as far as I needed to. Maybe I should start over again. All right, that's not going to work. I'm going to start over again. I screwed that one up. Let me get a rag and some MEK and wipe that all down, clean it all up, start over again. Try this again. All right, it's pretty obvious now that I need to practice at this, so having something like this to do is just about perfect. Okay. That's not too good, but that's not so bad. So this will all be covered up with fabric when it goes over the top there. But this just covers in this end of this rib better. So here's my first attempt at fabric, gluing on the fabric on here, and it went okay. It took a little bit to get it all figured out, but eventually I got it. So the main fabric will come over the top of the wing here and drape down in this concave portion here on the trailing edge on the false spar, get glued down in here, and then it'll have to be fitted into this corner here. So having this piece in here makes it a little easier to get that fitted. Same thing with the bottom piece. The bottom piece will come up into this concave piece right here and glued on, and then it'll be cut here and out to the wingtip bow and up around it. And so this area right here will be where that has to be fitted. Now this is loose. It'll be tightened up when we take the iron to it. So I'm glad I went ahead and did this as my first piece. There was a few little snags and stuff on it, but we eventually got it figured out. So now I'll go ahead and go to the inboard rib, mess around with it, see if I can't figure out how to close that in, because that's kind of the same thing. Both fabrics come out over the end and come down over that and made into it. And if I go ahead and cover it first, then all we have to do is bring them over the edge and tape them up, and don't have to worry about trying to fit it in there, chopping it up and stuff like that. So I'll go ahead and try to figure that out now. If I were to fit this fabric in on this butt rib using the fabric coming over the top of the wing or over the bottom of the wing, I'd have to do a hatchet job on it to cut out around this spar on both the forward spar and the rear spar. And then there's protrusions that come out of the spar that have to be accounted for. Now right now I've got the pitot static lines right here, and I just cut a little hole in the fabric right here to fit over the pitot static line. But by cutting this fabric to fit here between the spars, I can do a cleaner job on it. I punched a little hole in the fabric right here. That hole's going to expand once I shrink it, but for right now that's good enough. I might put a doubler or something like that over it. But anyway, I fit that over the pitot static lines and then brought it up in behind this drag strut so they can fit it over here like this, and then I can glue it on. I can bring it around this spar attach point here and kind of cut out for this bracket for the spar attach points on both sides and kind of do a little better job of closing that in. I'm going to have to put holes in here for the fuel lines, so there'll be a hole coming out of here someplace for top and bottom for the fuel gauge, and then a hole down here for the fuel line coming out, and another hole down here for the fuel line coming out, and then a hole up here for the fuel line that comes and goes down to the belly tank. And then we'll have another hole back here on the aft portion of this rib where the line goes in, the cable goes in that is for the flap actuation. And then of course up front here we've got the landing light and the nav light wires that are going to have an access for those. But like I said, by doing it like this, I can do a cleaner job than if I just brought this fabric up over this way from the bottom and brought it over the top and down here. Now the top fabric doesn't have to come here and tie down to here. It comes in over here on the back side on this rear spar and over this false rib, and in the front and goes down for the fuel tank opening, and then it gets glued down on that rib over there on the outboard side of the fuel tank opening. Now the lower fabric would come down and wrap around here and then come up and attach up here, but I won't necessarily have to do that. I can glue it in down underneath here to this wide piece that I put onto this butt rib, and that'll be good that way, and bring it up here and just put a seam tape right in here, and that'll make a good seam right there. So anyway, this center section is fitted in there. I can start gluing it down, and again, this is a good place to practice, a good place to get set up here so that I know what I'm doing. Now this piece, you can see how loose it is. Once it's glued down, and we take the iron to it and tighten that fabric up, that'll be drum tight there. That'll be really nice. So I guess I might as well get to this. Alright, what I'm going to do now is glue this down to this top of this rib to start with, and then this addition onto the rib where it, oh come on now, I didn't get enough glue on right there, the rib cap strip here, and then the addition onto the rib where the screws for the fuel tank cover go. Then once I get all done, then I can go in, take the iron and shape this and do a 90 on it and go underneath this rib on the underside, and then that'll really be good. Good and tight then. I want to get this down in on this seam right here. A little joggle right here where this nailer, this piece for the screwing on the fuel tank goes. And I'll get a little bit of glue in underneath there. There we go. There's another dry spot right there. All right, that's pretty good, I think. I'm going to get my son and turn this wing over to do this other side. Bottom side. He'll be here in a few minutes, take dogs for a walk, and when he gets done with that, I'll have him turn it over, and then I'll come up here tonight and do the rest of this. I'll cut some more pieces and do this other end, the tail end and the leading edge, nose end, and do the same thing with those. I've got fabric glued on here on the wing root on the top side. I got a piece here in the front with it notched out around that wire where it goes through there. I'll have to fit it down underneath there now. We're going to have to start doing some fitting around this leading edge on this one. And the same on the back here with this one. There's going to need to be some fitting done with it. Not so much because this one's pretty much square, triangular anyway, but there's a little bit of fitting that'll need to be done on it because there's an angle right here and we'll have to put a dart in that or whatever. I'll let that glue set up on there, pretty much set up on this back one and this middle one, this middle section here. The front I just got done with, and it's just about set up enough on there now, glued on there pretty good. So I'll get my son to help me turn that over, and I'll do the other side of it. It's a lot easier to do it that way than to lay on the ground or try to feel it. We'll quit for now. About time for dinner, I guess. Well, yesterday, after I got done working outside on my septic tank, I came in here and started putting some of this fabric on a couple of spots that are kind of sore spots when you go to put the fabric on the whole wing. The first place I did was down there where the outboard aileron rib is, and that was a little spot there. I had a little bit of trouble with it and had to do it over a couple times, but I got it on there right, and that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to start on these, to give me a place to start working on fabric and start to get the feel for it again. So anyway, I got that one done down there on the outboard aileron rib, and then I come up here to the inboard rib and put the fabric on this side of it, the top side. The wing was tipped over, so top side was up on it, so I put the fabric on this side and glued it down. I did 3 pieces. I did a center section here, then I did the same thing on the front section here. I cut out a piece to fit it on the nose rib, poked a hole in there for the lights, the landing light and nav light wires, and glued it onto the top here. And then again back here on the back section, on the trailing edge section, I glued up this piece here on there. And then when my son come home from walking the dogs last night, I had him help me tip this wing over, and I came up late last night and finished gluing this on, glued it onto this lower section of the rib here, fitted in and around the bottom of this trailing edge of the rib, and up here on the nose section. Well, the day I worked on my septic again out there. It's supposed to start raining today. In fact, it sprinkled a little bit this morning, but I worked on that again a little bit. And then I came in here in the basement, and there was one more sore spot on here, and that's down there where the aileron cove, the aileron false rib meets the flap false rib, and there's a little bit of a protrusion there where it sticks out, and a little bit of an odd angle. So I just fitted a piece in there, and again that took me a couple tries to get it done, to get it in there, fitted in there right. So meanwhile, this it all cured up pretty good here on this end rib and down there on the aileron rib. So I brought my little hobby iron out and set it up to 250 degrees, and there's several things you do with that at 250 degrees. One of them, you go over this fabric where it's glued on, and with it warmed up, that'll help shrink the fabric a little bit, to shrink out any wrinkles or high spots or anything that didn't get forced down, because of course this fabric has got folds and stuff like that in it, and it doesn't always fit down as tight as you'd like, but that helps smooth those out. There's also maybe little nodules underneath there of the Polytack, that little high spots and stuff where it didn't all come through the fabric, although I did a pretty good job on that for the most part. So anyway, there's little spots there that might be pooched up from Polytack sticking up, and then there's little nodules on the outside and places where it sticks up and things like that. That temperature, 250 degrees, is enough if you hold it on there to melt that Polytack and smooth that all out, the stuff that sticks through, the nodules and the stuff that's down underneath it. And that gets any spots that didn't get, maybe bumped up a little bit or something like that, that gets those down in there too. It gets those smoothed out. So that's basically what it's doing, is smoothing all this out. So I went over the whole thing, all the seams along there like that. And then I went over the open places in here and shrunk the fabric down a little bit. And then I turned the iron up to 300 degrees and went over all the fabric again here in this bay. And so you can see, I don't know if you remember what it looked like last night when I put this on here, yesterday when I put this on here, it was pretty loose. And by heating that up, that shrunk that fabric down and tightened that up. So that's pretty tight now. Now the next thing to do on that would be go over the whole thing with Polybrush and coat it all good with Polybrush, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. The next thing I'm going to do is start putting the fabric on the wing now to cover it. I went over all of this, the aileron outboard rib and this inboard rib, and then that little spot between the false spars, and got those all cleaned up real nice and all smoothed up and everything. Might go over this with just a little bit, with just some cloth, with just a little bit of MEK in it to take out any. Actually, they feel pretty good. I really don't need to do anything else with these, to be honest. I'm going to say to take out the excess Polytack where it sticks up or anything like that, but that all feels pretty good. So this is a little hobby iron. For the main part of it, you do it with a regular clothes iron. You start out 200 or 225 degrees or something like that. And you go over all of the seams and everything and make sure that they're all down nice and smooth and all of the wrinkles are out of it and all of that. And then you go over the whole thing on the wing and shrink the fabric down tight. And we coat it with Polybrush, and then we go through and put tapes on, or do the rib stitching, stitch the ribs, fabric down to the ribs, and put tapes on it. And anyway, there's a lot of work to do on here yet, so but that's a good start. That was practice, and that's what I did. One of the reasons I did this. The other thing is it makes this a lot cleaner installation in here. Like I said, we still got holes to put in here for the fuel tank vents and stuff like that, and the cable for the aileron, or the cable for the cable for the aileron goes right through here, and then the cable for the flap goes through back here. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this. I've got a little cotton cloth here. Got to make sure it's a nice clean no silica, anything like that in it. I'm just going to wipe over this real quick. Don't want to stop any place too long because you don't want to loosen that polytack up, especially after tightening the fabric up. If you loosen that up, then it's all going to come loose and you got to start all over again, which is probably not such a bad thing on just something like this, but once you glue something on there permanently, you don't want to have to tear it off and start over again. And I've got drips of the poly brush on here where it's splattered a little bit. Well, here's a little piece of the fabric. Say this is a polyester fabric, Dacron, something like that. It's pretty thin. There's different weights of it. There's a real lightweight stuff we use for experimental airplanes, ultralights and stuff, or even remote control airplanes. Anyway, there's a real light version. This is a middleweight, and then there's a heavy version for high-speed or heavy airplanes like a DC-3 or some of the others like that. So I've cut that, and you can see that's a little more than 3.5 inches wide. Well, I've got my little hobby iron set up here at 250 degrees right now. I'll go over that so you can see how much that shrank that down. That was we got 3.4 inches. It was 3.6.5, almost 3.7 inches. I'll turn that up to 300 degrees, 350 degrees, which is the most you want to do this. I'll let the iron warm up. All right, you can see how much that shrunk now. That's just almost exactly 3 inches now. Well, this is thicker than this, and the weave is tighter. I don't know if you can see my finger through it there. This section that didn't get shrunk, and then here on this section, you can still see my finger through it. But anyway, it's a tighter weave there now that it's shrunk down. So anyway, that's yeah, it's just a little more than 3 inches. So it just that little piece there shrunk almost a ½ inch. Iron's already cooled off. Now, one of the hazards of the irons is as you're using it, it melts the polytack and the poly spray and all that stuff, and it winds up contaminating the bottom of the iron, getting sticky. See how it's picking up all those fibers on there. I bought this little iron because it had a Teflon bottom, thinking that might make a difference, but it doesn't. Stuff sticks to Teflon just as good as it sticks to your fingers or anything else.